Welcome to our conference Self-Awareness, Being Yourself. Today we are going to have a discussion with a very fascinating person that offers a number of very interesting techniques to find yourself. I warmly welcome Luccio Schlettwein. You live with your family in Laufen, but you studied something completely different, mathematics, so masculine logic, which will also present itself in today's interview, I suppose. We need both feminine intuition and masculine clarity. My first question to you that I like to ask to all partners in this project: what does self-awareness mean to you personally? What self-awareness means? Well, that's a difficult starting point. To me, self-awareness is tightly connected to knowledge. So, to know something, and this knowledge is knowledge of myself. Who am I? What am I? Where am I? Where do I stand within this context? How do I stand in relation to other things that are also here with me, but also to be aware of what I am doing here and now and trying to act out of awareness, mindfulness, to know what I'm doing, to bring clarity to my actions in the present moment without connecting it to the next, to the future moments. What's going to happen next? I have no clue. But yeah, it's a feeling about now to know, yeah, I am in clarity. I know what's happening and what is here around me, with me, inside of me. What I'm doing, what's happening to me. That's a very important aspect of self-awareness to me. Of course, there are many things adding to that, but it's very important to me to remind myself that I do not know the truth, nor that I have the pretension to know what is right and what is wrong, accepting the fact that I do not know anything completely, that there is a lot I do know, I do understand, and in this way to allow some space. This is here, it exists without me being reactive to it. Because you cannot prove anything. Kind of. How did you, a mathematician, ever get on this path of self-awareness? It was another person sharing his spontaneous speak experience with me, and all of a sudden, a person like me, very rational, I found myself confronted with a statement like, I met Jesus, which was very hard for me at the moment. I didn't know how to deal with it. What am I to do with this information? And I wasn't ready to just push it aside in that situation since the person was very close to me. So I couldn't just brush it off me and say, well, this person must be completely out of their mind. And so I started to read something about it, but quite randomly, just things that I found by chance, many of which I did not understand at all. I had no clue what they were talking about, and that was a key moment to me in which I understood that there is more that I do not know, that I could integrate in my perception, in my vision of the world, aside from rational thinking and logic. And then, by chance, I had to undergo a meniscus operation following a sporting accident, and while I was in the hospital, I had a very thick book with me, and I had loads of time to read, and maybe it sounds silly, but I had the feeling that a door was opening for me. What was the revelation that it presented to you? Well, for me, it was the realization that rational thinking isn't wrong. It's not about childish superstition that you carry around until your mid-40s and then suddenly you realize it was the truth of life and you leave everything behind. No, no, no. It's much more about integration. So everything has its designated spot. Things work just because some physician found out some laws and an engineer invented a machine following these laws. This is only possible because we are very rational beings who managed to discover so much, and I realized I can integrate this all in a bigger picture, and it has its own space. It is not everything, but it fits, and it's all about bringing things together. For me, it wasn't just nonsense. It presented itself as something really precious. It made sense in my way of seeing things. In a way, it was pretty logical to me, which might seem counterintuitive. Science and spirituality used to be almost the same thing some centuries ago, and I believe this union is coming back. Yeah, maybe. Slowly. Slowly but steadily. What is the spiritual world to you? The spiritual world to me, well, it's about experiences that I could make. Maybe the realization of things being linked to each other, being interconnected, that we all belong together somehow, a part of everything, to realize that our experience is a game, maybe a theater play with dramatic performers that give everything somehow. It is always a role that we play, and the situations are not always easy. That's just the way it is. But to realize that even through discussions, we venture deep into something. During some breathwork sessions, we looked very deep into some layers of existence where I had to say, that's the next surface, the next skin of the onion we're peeling here. And you think, yeah, this is it, this is the center. Then there we are. And then, no, wait a moment, this is still a skin, and the same things over and over. And you start to wonder if in the end there's just nothing left, or if there are just infinite skins to this onion to peel, one after the other, after the other, after the other. I've got no clue, but this realization, this is spirituality to me. This contact to the divine, to the light, and to myself. You spoke of two things I would like to further discuss. The first, breath work. It's a very special breathing technique. How did you get into it? Well, I was in a professional low. I felt like I had absolutely no way out. I was really down in the dumps, and I accidentally bumped into it. I googled it, and the second sentence I read about it was talking precisely about professional breakdowns. And I thought, that's it. So I signed up for a week-long treatment in Spain, kind of a retreat, and afterwards I was doing great. I just realized it was very, very beneficial to me. I later realized the solution of my professional situation wasn't completely unknown for me to begin with. I actually knew it before as well. So there's no magic to it, really. I just didn't want to face the reality of things, which I now have to say was absolutely obvious. So I kept going to these workshops when I found the time, and later I decided to take on a therapist training, which was very easy to integrate in my life since it consisted of multiple modules that could be completed at different moments. So it was very varied. I could choose this course rather than this other one. I could go to Spain, to the USA, in the UK, Eastern Europe, and you kind of collect credits as you go. And I got to the point where I realized I had completed all the required courses. And a part of the training, which is really relying on presence, In other words, how am I standing in space as a relating being moment after moment after moment? Something you cannot just take off like all the other modules, something that develops through self improvement. And a very practical aspect of this is to realize that it's about my processes as well. It's really about myself. And after to realize I am here for myself, but also for someone else, and other things can wait until next week, next month. And it doesn't always have to be now the moment to explore all the layers of myself while working on someone else. I found myself in this situation, and someone addressed me and asked me if I liked to, as in, gave me kind of a hint. And I thought I wasn't ready, I wasn't able to, but in the end, little by little, I managed to obtain the certificate, and there was a huge handing over of the diplomas. This was back in 2012 when I completed the training, and afterwards I worked with people here locally and worked with very loud music where I encouraged people to express themselves, to scream, to let things go. And of course, you need the right kind of neighbors that can be accepting of this kind of practice and resulting noises without calling the cops. And did you manage to find some places? I did. Here, very close, a center for shamanism where they use a lot of drums, so the noise factor was already known in the neighborhood. And please, would you describe a session of breath work? As I understand, it consists of several sessions, so over longer spans of time. Yeah, exactly. In most cases, we work in groups consisting of at least 4 people. I personally think that less than 4 isn't really reasonable, and the number of participants is theoretically unlimited. The idea is to play music for about 3 hours. Well, it is like a 3 hour long music set, which is played without breaks in between, at first very rhythmical. I mean, these are patterns that have been used for a long, long, long time in rituals, and this musical process is designed to opening up your heart. The breathing is very easy. It's not a very elaborated breathing technique, as in, say, some yoga breathing techniques. The main idea is to breathe faster and deeper. Breathing and music while laying down. We work in pairs. One person breathes and the other person is controlling the process and helping. Maybe, I don't know, bringing water, paper towels. This breathing connected to the music brings you to a particular state of trance and ecstasy. And these states have been designed as holotrope states. These states are being used throughout shamanic work for healing, confrontation, for gaining insights, to answer questions whose answers can be experienced in these augmented states of consciousness. The idea behind it is to take on a journey through holotrope breathing and breath work, and to build a fundament of trust in these augmented states of consciousness, which to me represent my personal connection to the divine inside of me, my true self, so to speak, and that this inner healing brings about the themes or the points in our lives that need attention, that need to be seen, need to be worked on, say an insight, or rather the processing of a trauma or an experience of a karmic sort, and so on and so forth. And for this reason, it is a very accessible technique. We can work with themes that are important for us at the moment, that define our lives and our personality, and maybe the time really came to finally face them, to go in depth. Absolutely. In holotrope breathing, it is really about letting it all happen. And it is not really a therapy, so me, the facilitator, as we say, do the role of a therapist. I cannot explain to anyone what it means, what they experience. It is a knowing that comes from the client. It is left to him to interpret what burges out of the session and its meaning for his everyday life. For my understanding, this is something that can only be understood from the perspective of the individual. There is no external authority that tells me what's wrong with me, what I should change, what I'm doing right, whatever. But it must and it only can come just from within yourself. What comes with you after the session? I mean, you are in trance after all. What remains of the state? Yeah, you are in a state of trance, in a self-inducted trance. So I deliberately step into this state. And if a situation is too overwhelming, I can control it. I can withdraw from it. What many people report afterwards, for example, there can be some traumas in my life coming from childhood or from a past lifetime, and we have two possibilities. It's either something that wasn't supposed to happen, as in an accident, a loss, parents passed away, something, or something didn't happen that was supposed to happen, which is usually about love, lack of love between mother and child. These are very classic themes that come up during the sessions. What happens is that we experience these traumas again. With all senses involved, the feeling is called back. Some people lay in a fetus-like position as if they were little children, but the possibilities for healing open up at the same time because it's a safe environment. For example, I was about to drown once. During the session, I know I am not going to drown here and now again. There is someone looking after me, but reliving the original experience with full sensorial intensity allows me to sort of do what I was supposed to do at the moment, but couldn't because I was too weak, I was afraid, I didn't know, and so on. But in that moment, you can say, wait a second, no, I don't want this. It means to be able to say, no, this is not what I want, or to feel and receive the love I didn't get from a parent. It allows to come to terms with trauma that is otherwise always present. For example, I'm still afraid walking on the street because of that time I got mugged. And in this way, people realize that things happened, and they stop having such a big influence on my present. It's really about letting go and accepting what has been. Yeah. Like, I can't change what happened, but I can accept and gain the possibility to deal with it differently and accept it. What often happens, especially in parent-child constellations, I fall into a circle of wondering, how could this person do this to me? How could they? How could he? How could she? And this person may be long gone. So the direct confrontation could even be practically impossible. And I get stuck there. And what often happens is that you gain access to the energy surrounding the problem, the conflict, but from both sides. So, for instance, to become at once the father and the child. So it gives the possibility to experience the perspective of the father as well. The fear, the desperation, how the father got into it, maybe alcohol, violence, abuse, and maybe you find yourself drawing a different conclusion after all. Yeah, there are multiple truths in every situation. Exactly, and the realization comes somehow, maybe there was love nonetheless. It's about accepting and making peace with a situation that happened. It's not about undoing it. It's like a fundamental reconciliation. Yes. You used the word fear a few times, which is, in your opinion, the biggest fear of the human being. Fear tends to control our lives. We fall into duality. fear is present, what would you say? Fear. How does it arise? And what is it? A big fear that I see a lot is the fear of not being loved. And it translates directly into I'm not good enough, I'm not doing things right. A big fear is also the fear of death, fear of the unknown, what happens next. I mean, in the Western world, there is just nothing at all, which is not very reassuring. These are the things that come to my mind spontaneously. There is also fear just as an emotion, as a feeling, which is not necessarily connected to an object, but just as an emotion, which isn't right, isn't wrong, and like every other emotion too. And someone once said that fear is an element of innovation as opposed to love. Love is an element of steadiness. Fear means change. It's wonderful after all. Well, but the fear is usually impeding you to take on some changes, and maybe overcoming fear means to jump into something new. So, in your work too, I'm sure you find that if I really honestly have a good look at my fear, it can lead to a potential that I didn't know I possessed. Kind of. I believe that fear of the unknown, with death as a background, of course, it takes a lot of energy to make the change, or even not to make the change. Very often, when we overcome the fear, we realize afterwards that it wasn't half as bad as how I thought it was. So it's also overcoming our own stories, our own demons, and our own terrifying beliefs about ourselves and about our world. I believe that it takes so much more energy to cling onto a cliff and avoiding at all costs to fall. And this energy, when liberated, can be redirected to something creative, and many possibilities open up. You realize, wow, I have energy and time, and I really feel like doing new things. And this can be seen as new potential if you want. Yeah. Yeah, but also potential capacities we didn't realize we had because we were holding ourselves back. No, I think it's more about daring to do something big, whatever image I have created of myself, not being able to make it, to surprise yourself and say, I can do it. So, all while your head is telling you, you can't, you can't. You find within you the courage to do it anyway. You start to realize, and maybe you are startled to see that things work out. It actually works against my previous beliefs. It is possible, and to realize that we have so many stories, extremely well constructed stories of why we cannot do something. But if only we tried, who knows what could happen. Talking about walking, how is the experience? Do you feel outside of yourself? No, I realize in everyday life too, especially in holotrope breathing and in firewalking, not everything works out because I try. I can tell myself it'll work, and maybe in the end I will fail anyway. You need to start dealing with the situation, of course. There is no magic trick. But there is a point where we can realize there are a lot of stories we tell ourselves that we repeat many, many times and were given to us from past generations that we're also repeating them over and over and over again. And to realize, okay, maybe there is another way to look at it. Maybe I can tell this story differently. And during holotrope sessions, we listen to this little voice that we tend to ignore because it's very painful to hear. It's also about feeling and trusting, saying, yeah, maybe I cannot explain this decision rationally. I cannot know if it's going to be right, but I don't care. I try anyway, and maybe a door opens up where there has been a wall and things are suddenly possible. I've gone through this experience myself. I have another small question for you. I don't really have 3 hours of time to breathe and another 3 hours to recover from it. Do you have any small advices? Maybe something to do with breath, something that helps calming us down, centering us, bringing us back down to earth? In the stressful life events, after all, the breath is always there with me. It never leaves. Well, to me, the breath is just mean to an end, really. Maybe it's not really necessary. I don't believe you should tell yourself, oh yeah, I really need to do this breathing exercise. And I think it's more important to build up a routine in order to remember something. But the crucial point is to know what you want to remember. And in holotrope breathing, you learn to listen in everyday life, to listen to your inner world and building confidence, even if the whole world tells you you should take the blue pill. You can decide for yourself. No, the red one may be better for me. So I trust to know I am the one deciding for myself and I can listen what the other person says and even try out, but he is not the one who's going to live with my decisions. They will walk away and you will never see them again. So it's about being honest with yourself. We have the tendency to run to an expert and a doctor that tells you what you have and explains the world to do. But this trust and truth coming from within is what counts in the end. The other thing is the projection on the outer world. I am myself. What is outside, that's not me. That's something different. To know that everything is one and to practice this belief in daily life, which is very hard also for myself. And out there, things happen. You take some actions. Someone insults me on the street, and I realize this is very stressing to me. And you realize something is twitching in your insides, tells you, I don't like this. So things happen on the outside that provoke a reaction inside of me. But we have to stop and realize, wait, the emotion that arises is part of an inner process. So something happens on the outside and inside of me. There is a movie that starts to run. And the movie starts to run if I do not realize that it is about to start running. I do not realize that I look at the other person and think, it's his fault. It's his fault that I feel good. It's his fault that I feel bad. And it's important to stop and realize, no, it's about me in the end. Tell your story to yourself and ask yourself, what does it really all mean? And that this story can be told differently and the same things can happen, but the story connecting them can be different. You speak of a process that is in the spiritual world is called to create your own life. And I find your explanation very beautiful. It is me that create how I feel, and who is responsible is me and not the outside world. And you can bring your own vision to things in smaller or bigger contexts. Exactly. And the decision if I am okay or not okay with something is my decision after all. And it is also a very big responsibility. I mean, it's not always a piece of cake. It can get very difficult. I mean, how beautiful would it be if it was all someone else's fault? About responsibility, we really like to feel responsible for many things, not only for ourselves. How do we get to the point where we can truly say, wait a second, I am just responsible for myself and not for others, and how others feel, think, or act? For me, it happened the other way around. I first realized the other is not responsible for how I feel, and both realizations are actually the same thing. We all carry the responsibility for ourselves, but also for us in a bigger picture. So, for a part of ourself that represents nature. My access to these bigger pictures is dictated by me and myself alone. And from that perspective, it is really just my responsibility to care for my own well being, but just to the point that I'll be able to share it with others. It is very difficult and tempting not to stop if we keep just caring about our own well-being. So the problem is not just to care about feeling good all the time. It is important to know when to stop. And there the question about who am I and how am I separate from others starts to play a big role, because we all are one in the end. The breathing brings you in a very intense, different perception of our own bodies. So we feel it in a whole different way. What do you personally do with your body? I mean, are you like me that don't particularly like to move, or what do you do in terms of sports, nutrition? I mean, we are here after all, and the body is part of Earth, of reality. It is our temple, our home, and how do you look after it? Well, I used to do loads of sports. For me, it represented an interaction with others. I stopped because of knee problems, and afterwards, I realized that the competitive aspect of sports was something I was missing. And I don't know, individual sports like running, riding the bike, swimming, and so on are not really my thing. What I do is I try to move in my everyday routine. I ride the bike to work. I have a dog I walk every day. I like to take the stairs instead of the elevator, so I try to move without committing to, let's say, 2 hours of super intense training and then driving home. I like to be outside. I like to feel hot, then cold, then wet. These are all stimulations for the body that will then sometimes get sick or tired, yeah. Well, about nutrition, I think it's good to eat a bit of everything. I'm not on a special diet. I don't like to restrict myself to eat certain things or not to eat certain things. It works for me to be flexible, and I learn to listen to my body, to my needs. I mean, there are still a lot of chips in my life, and but some days I wake up and I feel like eating broccoli, or I suddenly realize I feel like eating tangerines, fruits, or meat. To trust these feelings is also very important. That's important for me in nutrition. I also try to avoid processed food. This is all part of taking responsibility for yourself and your body. I mean, it's also a matter of finances, really, and availability. I realized that these indoctrinated, strict diets won't do the trick for me. It doesn't make sense to me. It kind of blocks me, and I can't follow through in the end. I think the concept of trust has been really present throughout our conversation today. Where does your trust come from? And was it already present early on in childhood? And I feel from you that you have a very strong trust in yourself, that you trust your gut, your impressions, your heart. And what I find surprising, you even trust things you do not understand, and so on. How did it all come together for you? How did it all occur? Well, I started really early on. My parents were maybe responsible partially. I feel like it has been given to me, possibly. This feeling that it's okay and that I can do things how I think they are right. I've always seen myself as a lucky dog. Of course, sometimes things just don't work out, but somehow I haven't really thought much about things. Things just happened. They just resolved naturally. Even in my professional law, somehow I got on the right path and it solved itself. This is a very deep belief I have that things will work out. It's gonna be okay, even if it's not perfect. In my everyday life, this feeling is always present. Thank you very, very much for the interesting conversation and for the many explanations on what we can obtain through breathing work and what we can let go of through breathing and what can happen if we really assess ourselves. Thank you very much.